In episode 16 of By Reason of Air Safety, we looked at the effects of the Deregulation Act of 1978 on the aviation industry. While those who never saw the industry before deregulation might think, well, how bad could it be today? That would be the wrong question. Without a doubt, deregulation was bound to happen. Whether deregulation took place in 1978 or 1998, the airline industry, and as a result, all aviation industries caught in the wake, would have ended up where we are today. What would have been interesting, how deregulation would have looked if it was rolled out right. Oh well. But we're not here to rehash about deregulation. Deregulation didn't invent mergers. Deregulation just made mergers a heck of a lot more interesting. Hello, I'm Stephen Carbone, and this is By Reason of Air Safety. Welcome back. Now, first, a disclaimer. I know there are going to be those who watch this episode and say, that ain't right. Perhaps, but I invite them to talk about mergers they've been through from their own perspective. This is how I've seen them. Now, as an aircraft mechanic, I went through an airline merger, FedEx and Flying Tiger, back in 1989. So I've been there, got the t-shirt, and survived, though as compared to others, the fallout was minimal. According to which side you were on, well, either Federal Express's side or Flying Tiger's side. As an FAA regional specialist, I took part in the 2013 American Airlines merger with U.S. Airways. For those who would ask, there's little to no difference between a passenger airline merger and a cargo airline merger, at least from my perspective. Mergers of airlines for the airline employees are very disruptive, life-changing, and can be career-ending. That's not to say the passengers do not sense the tension brought about by the merger. They can and do. For instance, when U.S. Airways merged with America West in 2005, there was a lot of long-term tension between the two airlines. As an FAA inspector, I jump-seated in the cockpit on many U.S. air flights between Manchester, New Hampshire, and Charlotte, North Carolina. The two airlines' pilots did not like each other very much. However, after a few weeks, that stretched into months. To be honest, after years, the tension subsided after new people were hired, routes expanded, and airplanes were purchased. The division between America West and U.S. Airways was eventually swept into the Blue Room. Mergers have been and continue to be a reality of business. Despite the industry, they took place before deregulation, such as, for example, Delta Airlines and Northeast in 1972. This pre-deregulation merger was a good example of how an airline, such as Delta, chose to merge with another airline before deregulation. Delta, at the time, geared the merger towards being a larger domestic presence, expanding the West Coast to East Coast flights. And at the time, perks such as city-to-city routes became bargaining chips for U.S. government merger approvals. Remember, before deregulation in 1978, airlines were subsidized by the U.S. government, and so the U.S. government was heavily involved in who could merge and how. In 2008, Delta merged with Northwest Airlines, but it was for different reasons, specifically competitive reasons, such as survival and growth internationally, not domestically. The airline industry had changed drastically over those 38 years, suffering decades of the pains of deregulation, and so priorities changed. With more fuel-efficient aircraft, younger fleets, and more international access, Delta's long-term goals changed as well as from the first merger with Northeast. After whittling Pan Am down to a memory, Delta needed a well-established yet dependent partner like Northwest Airlines to increase Delta's presence internationally. The merge supplied more low-time aircraft, trained pilots, and maintenance support in a brief period of time, and Northwest needed a strong companion to join with. Delta took Northwest Airlines along into the 21st century, as did United with Continental when these two airlines merged in 2010, as did American with TWA in 2001, and then again with US Airways in 2013. Each merger made these airlines stronger together, more competitive. I would add in a post-deregulation industry, but by this time deregulation had its effects, good or bad, on industry. It was kind of a post-note. These three majors and other airlines had learned hard lessons, fought off the weak, and survived. So what is the purpose of a merger? Well, mergers take place for different reasons. Although there may be more, we'll limit this discussion to two and mention a third. Number one was acquisition, when one airline buys another airline and they merge together. Two is for purchase, buying of one airline's assets by another airline, such as routes and equipment. I mentioned this briefly when I said Delta bought out a lot of Pan Am and whittled them down to a small memory. And then there was corporate raiding, which is like a hostile takeover without spiking the ball. Airlines have and will continue to merge through acquisitions because of the mutual benefits. According to a group called M&A, Mergers and Acquisitions, there are 4 reasons to merge in this fashion. Financial distress. Loss of profit and insolvency can draw 2 competitors together to jointly work towards survival. During the unusual stresses from deregulation, airlines joined resources as a means to remain financially solvent. For example, Pan Am and National Airlines merged in 1979, shortly after deregulation took effect. Pan Am hoped to make an investment with National to stabilize their United States presence with more local destination choices. Although Pan Am hoped to benefit from the alliance, the buyout proved costly, and the two airline cultures didn't exactly prove compatible. Competitive positioning. Shortly after deregulation, merging in this fashion allowed airlines to compete directly with smaller, lower-cost airlines such as Southwest Airlines back in the day. Well, for example, in the time between the introduction of low-cost airlines such as People Express and the reality that People Express ran into when it discovered the cost of running an airline, People's did a lot of long-term damage to the legacy airlines already established and their market value. Mergers helped financially hobbled airlines survive. The next two belong together. Operational efficiencies. If done successfully, merging flight scheduling, labor forces, and fleets saves time and money in acquiring these resources separately. However, merging cultures is not as easy as it sounds. Then there's network expansion. This type of merger allows access to each of the two airlines' competitive edges, such as equipment, hubs, and routes. As an example of both of these, I submit Federal Express and Flying Tigers. In the 1980s, Flying Tigers was still the most successful non-scheduled chartered or supplemental operation, but they hit hard times because cargo airlines such as Federal Express and UPS expanded internationally with their own brand of quick package service, taking a good share of Flying Tiger's business. International Express package service was novel in the 1980s, but Federal Express was too arrogant. While the United States customers knew the Federal Express brand, the rest of the world could care less about purple airplanes. Federal Express, it would not adopt the FedEx name for 3 more years, then merged with Flying Tigers to get their foot into the international markets that Flying Tigers monopolized. It was a good plan. Flying Tigers opened doors for Federal Express with established international customers, provided Federal Express with established routes, and cut years off of building clients. However, Federal Express also took on an older fleet of tired aircraft from Flying Tigers, costly commitments, and a collision between union and non-union workforces, whose seniority lists still needed to be combined. Now, while upper management from both airlines threw up their hands and stepped back, employees had to mend fences themselves with little to no help from the echelons responsible. Even the best mergers have their problems. Pre-deregulation, airline purchasing was in play. The government became involved in the purchase deals, such as one airline could purchase another as long as certain routes were omitted from the deal. However, after deregulation, airline purchasing was reduced to buying shares in an airline or buying up routes, airliners, and divisions, as United did with Pan Am between 1985 and 1991. Not really, in my opinion, considered merging. Corporate rating used tools such as union busting. Rating was more about devouring the airline rather than growing it. It's not exactly in the same field as a merger. So what are the consequences of a merger? Well, let's be honest. Aviation is a small world. Airline employees between rival airlines get along very well, often help each other in the field. Can these two competitors be forced together after decades of competition and rivalry without any consequences? Well, the merging of two airlines isn't what affects the long term more than what happens behind the scenes and often spills out into the public eye. Mergers within any industry are life-changing. Not for the executives, no. Those folk make out good. A merger can be life-changing for the pilots, just as a merger can be life-changing for the flight attendants, as well as the aircraft technicians. Like many industries, it's how employees organize that separates them from the animals. I don't mean union organization. I mean how the employees arrange their work groups to allow for fairness. But when airlines merge, fairness becomes a hot-button item. The privileges one enjoyed pre-merger, such as seniority, domicile or home base, equipment, field station, overtime bidding rights, road trips, etc., can be affected by where the pilot or flight attendant or technician comes out when the seniority lists are merged. For example, let's say our old friends at Brand X Airways merge with Brand Z Airlines. Brand X has been operating since 2000. 26 years, while Brand Z has been operating since 2015, only 11 years. Now, Judy has been with Brand X since it began operations. Kelly has been with Brand Z since 2020. During the merging of seniority lists, Judy is given 1 year credit for every 10 years credit Kelly has. Where both flight attendants fall on the seniority list determines what cities they fly, work shifts, and equipment they fly on. If Kelly ends up higher on the new seniority list than Judy does, well, Judy could get bumped from the equipment she earned a place on over her career, and this could affect her flight schedule, her family, and where her family lives. Bill has been in the left seat on a wide body for Brand X since 2005. That's 21 years. Ray has been right seat on a Brand Z narrow body since last year. Where Ray lands under Bill in the seniority list could delay Ray's upgrade to wide body and or captain for years. This would affect Ray's annual income, possibly being furloughed, equipment choices, and or city trips. Now, Chuck has been working for Brand X since 2016, for 10 years. Anna has been working for Brand Z since 2016, also 10 years. Their seniority places them depends on how the lists are merged, such as 1 for 1, 1 for 2, etc. In the merger, there's a city Chuck has been wanting to bid, but Anna also wanted that city. Her place in the seniority list could bump Chuck from his dream location. This could affect how Chuck's cost of living, road trip possibilities, bidding rights, and overtime. The consequences of these events may seem trivial, especially to the casual observer. When Federal Express, I should say, merged with Flying Tigers in 1989, my standing on the seniority list didn't suffer as much as others who were hired in just a few months after me. Arbitration is a weird science. But the consequences of merging two conflicting cultures, such as a union and a non-union workforce, can be devastating to the survival of the two joined airlines. How a merger is handled, especially by upper management, can have a long-lasting effects on the new airline's future. Culture can be of a cooperative nature, or it can be corrosive. I've seen both. It might take years to correct itself, if it ever does. Either way, pre-deregulation or post-deregulation, some mergers have been productive, while some mergers have not. And if we are to believe this merger thing will somehow not be a thing in the future, that's unlikely. We're expanding now into space, maybe even fly to space stations in the future. Time will tell which airlines will be making regularly scheduled flights into orbit. If the late Stanley Kubrick had his way, Pan Am would have been the airline of choice to orbiting satellites. However, it's not to say that American couldn't merge with Delta and or United in the future to pull off the regularly scheduled space flight plan. They could call it Amdeltitide and Amdeltided Airlines, something like that. Or two cargo airlines. FedEx could merge with UPS, and they'd be called Fed Up. Sorry, old joke. I had to say it. It doesn't appear mergers will end. However, I do hope upper management takes the time to review historical mergers and make the right choices for both airlines and their people in the merger. One can only hope. Until next time, I am Stephen Carbone reminding you to tab. Think safe, act safe, be safe. God bless.